Hello, writers and crafters. I'm Valerie Isan.
And I'm Eric Mertz.
And this is episode 65 of the podcast, and it is April 12th, 2022 as we record this. Our main topic today is theme and story hypothesis with my friend JP Rindfleisch. Hi, JP.
Hello.
This podcast is sponsored by our patrons on patreon.com/Valerie Isan. For as low as $1 a month, you can get a shout out on the podcast and we can make announcements for you. So check out the tiers and see what works for you. JP, we always ask each other what we're reading right now. What are you reading?
Oh, I'm reading 3 things because I'm a monster.
Oh, wow.
So right now I'm reading Editing Your Novel Structure by Bethany A. Tucker. That's for an upcoming book club for one of my podcasts.
Which I can never come to. I'm a patron of you, but I can't come to those because I'm always at the day job at that time period.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, now that I know, we'll work around that. We can get you on.
Look at this.
I'm going to take a note of that.
This is great. I feel so warm and fuzzy already.
Networking at its finest.
Right.
Yeah. I am listening to Children of Blood and Bone by Tony Adiani. I'm sorry if I butchered that. And then I'm also reading Ever After, which is a queer Arthurian fantasy, which is really good, by F.T. Lukens.
Right on. What about you, Eric?
Cool.
Because I can't remember all of a sudden what I'm reading. Probably because I'm reading multiple books at the same time again.
I am listening to it's. I'm glad you said that, JP. I don't use my credits on Audible ever. I bank them, and so I decided to start using them. So I'm listening to The 3-Body Problem by, now here's a name I'm not going to get, Liu Shishan. Is that how you say the last name?
I don't know. We sell it in the bookstore, but I don't know how to pronounce it either.
It's fantastic. That's all I can say about it. It's really great. The reader is fantastic. So I may be using those Audible credits again real soon. And then I'm also reading the physical book, The 1,000 Crimes of Ming Su by Tom Lin. It's kind of a Western, classic Western told through the eyes of a Chinese American assassin. And it's a heck of a lot of fun. I'm not too far into it, but it holds a lot of promise. Very literary. So
cool. Well, I just finished reading A Boy with a Bird in His Chest. That was a really great book. Now I'm starting on that. And then after that, remember the Jump the Stack, I was reading the wisdom of the particular wisdom of Sally Red Shoes. It was a library book that popped up and said I had to read it in 2 weeks. So I did. So now I'm back to A Ghost in Your Throat, that Irish memoir.
Cool.
So that's what I'm reading. And then I also finished listening to whatever my last book was on there. I forget now. And listening to a James Patterson book, actually, because I gave the book to my stepmother who loves Dolly Parton and those crime thriller genre novels, which I never read. And so I gave that to her because she loves Dolly Parton and reads James Patterson. And I thought, well, because I get advanced listening copies through the bookstore, I thought I would listen to it too. So I'm not really into it, but
what's the connection between Dolly Parton and James Patterson? I don't know that.
They co-wrote the book together.
Oh, okay, that's right. He's always
it's called Run, Rose, Run. That's the name of the book. So I don't know. I'm just barely into it. It's not a genre that I normally read, but as a bookstore seller, as I am a bookseller, I try to read outside my genre. And so this is definitely outside my genre. All right.
I read my first Patterson last year and I got through it. Let's just say I got through it. Wasn't my favorite thing.
I don't like slamming, genres, but I'm kind of a genre snob, and working in the bookstore really has changed that for me. And I'm finding that all genres have good writers in them. Who knew?
Right.
Okay, I'm going to stop talking before I incriminate myself further, and I'm going to read JP's bio. JP Rindfleisch is a writer of Things Dark, Strange, and Queer, a co-host of the Right Away podcast and serial fiction show, and a 3-story method editor and coach. When they aren't spouting on about the importance of community or how theme can be an excellent tool for writers, they find themselves wandering into nature with their Siberian husky, partner of 11 years, and a campervan aptly called Hank the Tank, which I have seen, by the way. Their works include several short stories, a serial called Nerds with Jeff Elkins, a previous guest on our podcast, and an upcoming dark urban fantasy series with AB Cohen, and an upcoming 3-story method Masterwork analysis of the road with J Thorn. Welcome, JP.
Hello, hello.
I'm excited to see you again.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see you, and nice to meet you as well.
To meet you too.
All right, so we're going to be talking about theme and story hypothesis, and you know what the difference is, and how they're similar, and how we use them in writing, and yeah, I heard you speak about story hypothesis at a conference, and I thought it sounded really interesting, and I like the way that you made theme even more accessible to folks that are kind of freaked out by that T word. And so I just wanted you to come and talk a little bit about it on the podcast.
Yeah. So I think I would love to start off at the base level, looking right at theme. And I'm curious, in both of you, when you write, how do you use theme at the moment?
At the moment, I'm writing a memoir, and I think theme is super important when you're writing memoir, and you have to know what that is before you even start, because I kind of look at it as the takeaway, as the why am I bothering reading this book message. So I want to know what that is, and I have to make sure that it's in every single scene of the book, or at least chapter, so that the reader is knowing why they're there the whole time. That's what I'm doing right now with it. What about you, Eric?
Yeah, for me, I think I would say I'm a little more loose. I write paranormal mystery and in a series. And I think what I end up doing often is, I'm writing with a continuous character in a continuing mystery series, and there's an underlying mystery throughout. And I think what I do is I sort of bracket where I want each individual story to be, whether it's a short story episode that exists between novels or novels. And I try to write the story piece of it, but then, strike on a unique theme within the series for that book. So if it's more exploring the love story, then it's more exploring a darker element, or the brother story. So I try to find the finer theme after I've bracketed the subject matter.
Gotcha. And I guess so. The reason I ended up honing in on theme for me was when I was in high school and when I was learning, like, theme was basically the appendix of storytelling. Like, it's just the thing that people say, like, well, what was the idea of Star Wars? Well, it's about hope. And then we're done. Like, okay, I can't do much with the idea of hope. So what am I supposed to do with that? And especially as a writer, like, the theme of hope is so broad. I have no idea what to do with that. So I just kind of shoved it in a corner. And then I just started to think more and more about it. Like, well, what's the whole point? And that's actually the question that theme answers is, what's the point of the story that you're telling? And so I did some digging, and that's really when I picked up on the Brian McDonald armature. So have both of you heard of the armature from Brian McDonald?
I've only heard it from you, so I don't actually know it.
I have not.
Okay, so in the book The Golden Theme, armature is what you want to say with your piece. It's the point in which your story is sculpted around. So if we think of like armature as in a chair, it's the skeleton of the chair, and then your story is, the foam, and it's the leather. And I have to give huge props to Brian McDonald, because he was really where like my ideas spurned from, because I still didn't get it. I was like, okay, I've got this. I don't know what that means. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. And I know that there are a lot of people that they shy away from theme, and it's not because they don't want to use it, but it's just because they don't know how to use it. And I come from a sciencey background, and I was like, okay, well, in the realm of science, we use things like hypotheses, and we come up with a hypothesis, and then we test various different measures and determine whether or not the hypothesis we made has a correlation, has some sort of relationship or not. Best thing about being a writer is you don't have to do those pieces. So the thing that hooked on was that hypothesis in the science world can be reapplied to a theme. And if we turn the idea of what the point is from a broad spectrum of hope and drill it down to a statement that we can debate as the core message throughout the entire story, then I feel like people that want to use theme can approach it in a better manner. So that's like the huge big overview as to like where story hypothesis comes from.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's interesting. I know that is very broad, and so I kind of want to drill down into like what that means. And for me, story hypothesis really ties into methods of like survival. So if we think about like story is it spawns from this idea that we're trying to tell a message from one person to another. We're conveying a story that is in need of survival. Brian McDonald talks about this. I'm going to give him huge props because he's the one that this all comes from. So I believe You Are a Storyteller podcast is a really great starting point for anyone that's looking for more information on this. But the key point here is stories kind of started around this fire when we were, thousands of years ago. We were around a fire and we were trying to convey messages of survival so that other people wouldn't run into, the lion out in the dark. So that's really where stories come off from, is this theme of survival. So I originally, with story hypothesis, was looking at what is his name? I'm forgetting it off the top of my head. The hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Right. But I ran into a problem because Maslow's hierarchy of needs has base level survival and then like one's own understanding of oneself. But there's a lot of problems when you look at like, well, if I'm trying to tell a story about post-apoc, well, then everything is going to be about survival. And these modes of survival tie really strongly into one's hypothesis. And that's when I found Max Neef, who tells a different method of survival, or this like different taxonomy of human needs. And this all ties back together, I promise. But these are 9 needs that weigh differently depending on what we need at any time. So we've got these 9 needs are subsistence, which is your survival, protection, affection, understanding, participation, recreation, creation, identity, and freedom. So if we take those 9 pieces and we mix and match them based off of the stories that we want to tell, I feel like we can pull themes that become our hypothesis to tell a better story. So if I take The Road, for example, Road is a story that is post-apocalyptic. It's a man and his son who are basically going along the road trying to reach the coast. The 3 modes of human needs that I pick up off of it is protection, the man needing to protect his son; affection, the man loves his son so much that he will do anything to protect him; and then subsistence, the need for survival. That one's very genre dependent. Subsistence is very post-apoc. If I put all 3 of those together, I can come up with an argument that says a father's love for his son and his drive to help keep him alive leads to the son's autonomy and survival when the man can no longer be there. If I have that statement, I then have my hypothesis that I can use throughout the whole story.
Wow. Okay. So taking the 9 needs and figuring out where your manuscript like pull the needs from the protagonist's needs from that list, and then come up with a story hypothesis or a statement that you can prove or disprove with your book. Is that right?
Exactly. And the best part about this hypothesis is it is a sliding scale. Because if you look at this argument that a father's love for his son and his drive to keep him alive leads to his son's autonomy and survival, you have whenever his father is showing his love and whenever he is trying to keep his son alive, his son becomes more autonomous and more capable of survival. But that also means the opposite. So whenever you have scenes where the father is going against the grain, then we are running into moments where the son no longer feels like he is free, where the son no longer feels like he's able to survive. And so you run into this sliding scale of your hypothesis. And that then, if you run into moments when you're writing your story and you have moments where the father is frustrated with the son, well, then his son is not going to feel like they're going to make it. They may run into an issue where the father then becomes gravely ill because he is now moving against the grain of protecting his son.
So that feeds really well into the obstacles that the protagonist is going to hit. That middle slog is going to be all this sliding scale of, interesting. Now I want the list so I can figure out.
So I do have a couple more that I came prepared with because I didn't want to just leave you with the road. So like I was just thinking about the TV show specifically, The Handmaid's Tale. And some of those was freedom, participation in the form of rising up, and then protection. For this, I felt like that keystone for the character was freedom, this need to be free from her situation that she's in. The genre is very much dystopian. So I picked up that participation would really reflect that dystopian. You know, it's that need to rise up, to participate, to actually be someone that has a voice. And then the need to protect others it's also just like that secondary piece within freedom. And I picked down, we cannot protect the ones we love unless we stand up against our captors and fight for the freedoms we deserve. And so even in that sense, if we think about what's the opposite of that, well, anytime that June is not standing up, she isn't, she's not protecting the ones that she loves. She runs the risk of losing the ones that she loves. So every time that she can't help her daughter gets farther away from her. Every time that she stays quiet, someone gets hurt. And it's whenever she takes those moments to stand up against it, she may be hurt and she may be physically hurt, but she's getting closer and closer to this moment of freedom.
That's exciting. I like having kind of a checklist in mind when I'm writing. And now I feel like I totally have to do this with my book. I'm afraid that my theme phrase is not going to cut it now. I'm going to have to rewrite really because of you, JP.
Those two examples are so clear. I think with the road, it's the concept in that story is so clear, and I'm thinking of scenes from the book and the movie that articulate that theme in the ways that you said. It's anybody who's watching is watching me nod along with you because it's very it makes a lot of sense, right? Because when you're working with the theme, the story, the character's goal is getting closer to being met, and when they're working against the theme, it's pulling them apart.
That does make sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It simplifies something that should be that simple.
Well, and that's the funny thing is that my frustration with trying to understand theme started from the fact that theme was too broad. It was too simple. And so putting a structure to it all of a sudden made it even more simple to understand. It was almost like a sliding scale of itself.
Right.
So what?
Oh,
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Nope. Go ahead.
I was just gonna try to bring it to more particulars. Like if you run into, say, in your story, you are at a place where, well, okay, let's just use mine. I'm done writing it. I mean, I need to make it deeper. I know that, more emotional, and I need to do the settings pass because I suck at that. And that never ends up in the first just 5 drafts. But in order to go back through and make sure this process that you're talking about is going to work, I guess, where does that start? I mean, at the stage now, do I come up with the statement and then go through from chapter 1 all the way to the end of the book and just see if I go scene by scene and make sure that I'm doing that sliding scale thing, or like what's my next step?
Yeah. So what I've done with clients and what I do with my own writing is I will approach this first drafting, and I will think about like what my themes are, because I will plot. And so when I plot, I'm thinking about the choices that my character is making, and I'm making sure that it reflects the theme.
I do too, but I've already written it.
No, and that's the thing, is there is a second pass once you've completed it, where I will no longer look at my original theme. I will look at the work and I will determine what is the work saying. So like I pulled these themes out from The Road and The Handmaid's Tale, which are completed works. They're not my works. And so I'm able to look at what is this story telling me as a reader? And then I'm picking out like what were the 3 modes of survival. And then once I picked out those 3 needs, or that was what I meant, is the 3 modes of needs or whatever. I looked at those and I said, well, what is that saying as a statement? Usually what I'm trying to do with a hypothesis is at its base level, I'm saying X leads to Y. So you can see like in the first one, father's love, drive to help keep alive, leads to autonomy and survival. You know, we can't protect the ones we love unless, quote unquote, leads to stand up, you know. So there's always this like, if you do this, then this happens in my statements. And that's because when I have that, when I've written that down and I'm going through the editing process, if I'm running into a scene where I don't feel like it's strong enough, I'm looking at my theme and I'm saying, am I meeting what this theme is stating? Am I doing that enough? Because there are some times where when we're writing, we don't see it. We write the scene and then we come back and we look at this theme and we're like, wait a minute, this ending needs to change on this scene because this isn't reflecting it. That's what's wrong with the scene. I found that so many times when working with clients is like, we'll just run into a scene where it's like, this just didn't feel right to write and I don't know where to go. Let's look at the theme. Oh my gosh, they need to do this other thing because that's the direction the story needs to go clearly. Like I can see it in front of me.
And I think, Valerie, I think what this also implies too is that the essence of an exploratory draft is taking that idea, that maybe that raw idea, and saying, there's something here, I'm going to play with it and see. And that, you know, for a lot of writers, that's the essence of that second draft. Like, oh, now I know what this is. And I do that a lot with short stories where I'll get into it. Again, I'm like working within a bracket of plot that I want to execute, and then say, oh, this is really more about this. And then, you know, finessing those things. It's the art of rewriting.
Yeah, definitely. And I also find using this method helps me figure out what are the best obstacles that I could use, or how to tweak the obstacles to better reflect the theme. Because if we think about the theme, if it's a sliding scale, that means that we can show it at its ultimate worst. We can show it at its ultimate best. We can show it when the character believes that they're doing one thing, but their actions aren't reflecting that, and how that looks based off of the theme. And we can show all these variations that make the same argument. And if we just are like, okay, well, I'm not showing the worst, let me put an obstacle in there. If I'm not showing the best, let me put an obstacle in there. So that's what I do when I'm in that middle and I'm kind of stuck and I'm like, what to put here?
Do you think that if this theme is the takeaway message or the proving of the statement, so when they close the book the reader is done and they know they have this belief now because of reading your book. Do you think that at the end of the book, when they close it, that's where the theme is strongest? Does it have to like rise up and like crescendo? This is the theme, or is it more a sine wave or something?
I hate saying things in finite, so I will never say that everything has to end the same. I think when we're talking about things like post-apocalyptic and dystopian, usually they do have those crescendo moments. Usually that's how you end those stories, but not all stories end like that.
It's a big bite. I mean, the whole idea is a big bite, because I think that, I mean, what understanding this gets to is, I think it's kind of the deepest place you have to understand your story. And that's probably why we shy away from theme, or why, you know, you see writers running away from it. It's because that depth is intimidating.
I also have another one that's maybe a little bit different. It's The House on the Cerulean Sea. Now, I know the author loves to say, I love that book so much,
I've never
but I
read
know
that
that the
book.
author
Oh my
likes to
gosh.
say, you must.
Okay, I'm writing it down.
Yes.
TJ Klune,
the
with
author
a
likes
K.
to say that the theme is kindness. However, looking at these needs, I pick up on recreation, identity, and affection as the three kind of needs. And then the hypothesis I come up with is, when we accept who we are and we let love in, we find our true family. And that's really reflected in the fact that he has to really accept his own self and allow others to give him the affection that he wants and needs. And then that's when his true family is, which is already in front of his eyes, is clear to him. He knows the choices he needs to make. And you can even see how, like, accepting and letting love in, when he's not around that family, everything's gray, everything's drab, people are cruel to him, and he doesn't really fight against them, and he has a different identity. And then when he is in his right place, he finds his identity, finds that self.
Do you think there's a ratio between using the theme? You were talking about using the statement to create more obstacles and less, and do you think there's a ratio in the book of how you do that? Like more in this part of the book, or more here, or?
Yeah, so I think that when I read these books and I think about it through the aspect of story hypothesis, I'm thinking that that beginning first act has a lot of moments where it's on that lower end, where we're more restrained against that theme. And so we're showing the negative aspects of those themes. And then in the middle, you have this kind of sine wave, ups and downs, moments where we feel like we're at the top, but we're not. And then, of course, this follows the standard, the all is lost moment, where everything is at its ultimate low, and then your peak back up. So I think that there is, it's kind of like a squiggly little scale that goes up in a direction.
A squiggly scale that goes up in a direction. I like that.
And, as scientific as I can get, right there.
Right. And I think too, like when you talk about the road, which I adore, when you talk about the different points of the book, like where there's different tensions, like that book definitely becomes more tense. The survival story changes, intensifies. The sun grows. They grow closer. I mean, there's so many moments in there that, yeah, so it makes a natural, it does. I can see now, like using that example, how there's different tensions at different times. There's rising and falling. Up to the crescendo.
And to specify, like, a moment in the road that really sticks out to me is when they find the bunker and they have this moment where they believe, we have everything we need. Technically, we don't have to go to the coast, but it's a false positive. It ultimately will not lead to his son's survival. And he knows this. And that's the reason why they keep going. And that's that moment in the theme where you have that false positive, where the man could think, this is the moment where I can keep him alive, but it won't be for long. And he has to keep moving on. And it's that moment, I think it's like exactly right in the middle of the book, but it's that moment of deciding, is it the food that we have today, or is it the promise that we have tomorrow? Is that what we're going to move towards?
Right. So one of the things, I came from screenwriting. Well, I didn't come from screenwriting. I've always written fiction, but there's a lot of screenwriting advice out there that says write the log line first. Capture that 40-word nugget of the story before you start writing it. Do you think it's important to, I mean, Val and I often kick around the plot versus pants debate, and
Mm-hmm.
we're shying away from ever doing an episode on it. But, for people who are plotting, who are thinking ahead, do you think that, this comes before you actually get into character? Or do you think that how do you do this in your writing?
So how I do it is I will follow like the 3-story method. So I do that log line and I do the Pixar pitch. But when I'm doing that, I'm also thinking about themes or needs in a general sense. What are the 3 needs that my character is going to need? I may not have my statement yet, but if I know that my story is going to be about, protection, love, and subsistence, then I at least know the direction I want to take it.
Right.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to come up with a theme statement before I do my plotting for my scenes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the first thing I do.
Right. Talk about, so do you write short stories, JP? Are you a short story writer as well?
Yep.
So you write in different lengths. So what about the difference in looking at this exercise when it comes to a novel versus a short story? Do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, so I did this for a short story. Fun fact. So I did this method for speech sounds by Octavia Butler, and even then,
cool.
I picked up on three needs. I picked up on understanding identity and affection, and the statement being that the ability to connect and understand others leads to safety, peace, and community. So even then, like, I'm still picking up on a theme in that short story. Does this mean that everyone's going to do this? Does it mean that every short story has a theme? No, some short stories are just, as much as they want to be or as little as they need to be. But I do think that this method can be used for short stories just as easily as long form fiction.
Well, it makes sense. I think that a short story, and to some extent, another subject for another podcast, is a harder standard to execute, in a satisfactory way. You have 5,000 words. You have to nail, you have to create that identifiable world and theme so that the reader can identify, they can get into it and then execute it in time for it to be a short story. I think that's why a lot of us end up starting writing short stories and end up with, novels or novellas, because they're meandering.
So like short stories, you don't have a lot of real estate to get your point across. So to me, when I write short stories, I almost feel like the themes are stronger in those because I have to be far more direct. My scenes have to be more tied together to tell a cohesive story and to make some type of argument. At least for me, that's what I like to do with my stories, is there's a point that comes across for them.
Right. And that concept that you're talking about, that argument, is again, without a lot of real estate, you have to make sure that it's clear. The sides are clear, the lines are clear, and what's at stake is clear. Otherwise, again, you're meandering into a longer form. You're not executing it. I think of great short stories where like that higher concept short story feels like it is really just about a central argument, and that is an author sounds to me like an author executing this concept really tightly, in a really deft way. Have you had any luck with Kindle Vella?
Yeah. So, yes. Yes. So Kindle Vella has been a really fun platform to play off of and use with Jeff Elkins, which has been a wonderful, wonderful person.
Oh,
Yeah, so Kindle Vella has been a really fun platform to play with and to work off of how serials function differently than different forms of storytelling. This is my first serial, and it's with Jeff Elkins, and we've been having a really fun time trying to include humor in some really uh, dark ghost stories.
How are you able to use, since you are a plotter, how
Mhm.
do you plot out your serial? Can you do that? Do you?
Yeah. So uh, we planned out the serial with about 67 episodes, as we call them. And they all have their own about 10 episode plot points that they hit. Uh, and then that's like our season one. Some people, they have it long running. And in that sense, those serials more or less, the recommendation for like how one may plot out those is you plot out roughly your first 1 to 3 plot hits, and then you plot out your end, and then you just go for forever. And at one point or another, you get closer and closer to whenever you want to end it, and then you wrap it up knowing how it's going to end. But yeah, we have it planned for season one. We know how many episodes are going to be released, give or take probably 10. And then from there, we'll probably run into season two, which is going to be slightly different.
So when you have you taken this story hypothesis before you started plotting this out and
It
did that on the serial?
So I don't have it written out as a statement, but it is very closely related to, I mean, it's a story about these agents who are dealing with people transitioning over into the afterlife. It's very much a story about like grief and loss, and like that's how I'm approaching it, even though we're trying to do it in a humorous form. I don't have a hypothesis for this one. This was plotted out before I hashed out what the hypothesis was. But I think I want to create one for it just to ensure that, it's what I'm preaching.
I just think it's such a cool, we're kind of deviating from the main topic, but I think Kindle Vella is such a cool idea for
It is.
storytelling. I think, and I've yet to find one that wasn't compelling, and so I think people are doing great work with it. So I hope it sticks around, um, and that Amazon finds a way to market it. So
Definitely. Speaking, since I'm one of the co-hosts of the Serial Fiction Show, and I've spoken with a lot of the authors who are, 1, 2, 3 in Kindle Vella, and they have a lot more connections than I do. And it sounds like Kindle Vella is here to be here for quite a while. So I
good.
don't see it leaving anytime soon.
How would you, or would you recommend an author that doesn't write serial get into serial writing?
Yeah. So I think the really important thing for Kindle Vella is to have your first 10 episodes written before you hit publish on episode 1. 10 is really a good buffer for anyone that's going to be launching. I'm going to get really specific to Kindle Vella because there's a couple things that are different and different sites, but Kindle Vella, the first 3 episodes are free. So if you are just going to post your first 3 episodes, you're not going to have people that are going to read through and click the buy button. And you may have people that may not follow the story because you don't have enough. So you really should be posting your first 6 if you are going to be doing Vella. This is all like people have had success posting 1 and then, slowly rising up. But this is my recommendation. I've also heard 5. But that's what I would recommend to anyone that's looking to start it. Now, a serial is not chopping your book up into pieces. It is very important. It is a very different platform, and people are looking for things that are going to be longer form because serials come from the manga. They come from anime where you have these long running series. And so that's kind of the reader expectation. they're expecting each episode to kind of be its own little enclosed unit. It's its own little short story of the story world that you've created, between 500 to 5,000 words. I hesitated really heavily on 5,000 because that's too much, but people do have success with 5,000. But that's my recommendation. Just to get like a little bit more specific with Nerd Serial, we keep ours at about 2,000 words for every episode because we like that consistency, because these are purchased by tokens. So that's another thing for you to be aware of if you're going to get into it. If they're purchased by tokens and your reader knows that it's 20 tokens to read every single time, then they're going to keep coming back. If it's all the Sunboardy tokens, I don't know if they're going to stay.
Right.
What do you do with the serials after they're up on Kindle Vella? Can you collect them and make an omnibus out of them and publish them in another way?
Yes. So if you want, you can put your Kindle Vella story onto other platforms that also have a paywall. So you could put them on Patreon. This is not advice, read your terms and services, but you could put it on Patreon. I have mine on Neovel, Later Press, and Fictionate, because all three of those also have paywalls. And then after 30 days of the last episode that you've published that you want to include in a collection has been published, then you can publish that as an ebook or whatever you want to do with it. So you can always reuse the content in different ways. Just know that however you go about it, you're going to have a different readership. You could run the risk of splitting your readership. With us, once we're done with season 1, we're going to re-edit it and we're going to compact it into a novel. So the novel is going to be written differently because it has different expectations to it. But we're also in the middle of that. We're going to be posting 10 episodes a piece as a ebook, just so that people could catch up if they wanted to for a cheaper price.
Cool. I like that idea. Yeah, because I heard Stephanie Bond talk about podcasting her book in this serial kind of way, and then creating those ebooks and full books, as she goes, and doing it daily for free on her website, which I thought was a really cool idea. And I went and I plotted out a whole thing, and then realized, like, I don't read short fiction. I don't I've never written it. So probably I should just make this a novel instead of a serial. But I loved the idea. I thought it was really cool. And I still entertain the idea every once in a while, but I think maybe since I don't write in series, I just write standalones. I mean, I can link my standalones very loosely by like area of the world, but that's about it. So I feel like maybe I'm just not the demographic that would write serial fiction, but I like the idea.
There is a novel or a book called How to Write Light Novels and Web Novels by R.A. Patterson. And he has another book about like how to write manga. Both of those were very useful tools in figuring out how to write this kind of long form fiction that is very different from novels. It pulls in a lot of the Asian inspiration that comes with serial writing. And it made it very clear what readers would expect with a serial. So I just found it very useful. I recommend it.
Okay. And it was how to take long form and make it short, or how to?
No, just how to plot it out, how to do it.
Oh, okay. Oh, for the short fiction. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, there is an art to episodic storytelling. I do screenwriting, and I get a lot of clients who want to adapt their movie to a TV series, and they say, "We'll just cut the first 30 minutes, and then we'll cut the next 30." No, it's not. It's not like that. It's a different thing. But I think there's a lot to, I think stretching your story muscle is a great idea for anybody, right? If you're comfortable writing novels, thinking about going into series. If you don't, or thinking about going into shorter episodic stuff, it's a way to stretch that storytelling ability and get there. Who knows what you're going to be good at?
That's
Definitely.
true.
With Kindle Vella and this whole different structure, it has made me write scenes tighter in my novel writing, and it's also given me understanding that the chapters are important. Every chapter in your novel is important, and it's not just there as filler. And it's not like I was writing it before as filler, but there's something I learned that I don't know if I would have learned through Kindle Vella and through writing serials, of just the importance of how every episode counts, every episode matters, and that means the same whenever you write long form or novels.
Right.
When you are, maybe you answered this already earlier in a different way, but when you're plotting or going back through your manuscript and checking for the 3 C's and doing your scene analysis and stuff, is theme part of that for you? Okay, so that's just another checklist item that you go through scene by scene? Okay.
Yeah, so it's actually because we do this in Serial Fiction Show, we'll read the author's first episode. And in that first episode, we put the expectation on ourselves to pick out the theme or the armature. So because I've been doing it so much, I will, when I start reading someone's novel, I will be like, okay, well, this is the theme I'm picking up on your first page. And in my head, I'm like, this better be the theme that I read at the end of this. Like, I better be expecting the end of this. And so I'm already doing that naturally, but I will write it down for my clients. And I will say, like, this is the theme I picked up on. I didn't feel like it was strong through this much of your book. And let's talk about it if this is the theme you want to pursue. So yeah, I use theme whenever I do client work. And
when you are, you do so many things, and you also have a day job too, and you travel for work and craziness. So how do you write novels and serials and co-write and
not well?
I want to know.
No. Okay. So one, I have so many collaborators with me that's I don't know what I would do if I didn't have them. So I props to all of the people I work with, just because they keep me motivated to ensure that I'm getting stuff out the door, and that I'm providing them with what they need. And then I guess from like a self perspective, I have from, like, I'm a morning person, I'm sorry for anyone who isn't, from 5:30 to about 7 every day is like guaranteed writing time. So I will put on, I'm using this app called Centered, highly recommend. It's amazing. It does the Pomodoro, but it also like makes sure you're not jumping off of onto different websites, which I sometimes fall down rabbit holes for. But it makes sure that I get the writing done in that period of time. Then I also just find any nooks and crannies for different times. So whenever I'm traveling, I have a 50-50 chance that the afternoons in the hotel room after work will actually be productive. Other times it just won't be, and I have to accept that might happen. But yeah, it's really just about finding the time and just allowing it to come in, and not be frustrated when I can't get those times, because
that's so important.
It's maddening to me, like how much time I spent being frustrated that I couldn't write, because frustration takes energy, and it's funny because then you're just more frustrated that you can't do things. So it feeds itself. So once I stopped doing that, it felt more natural to just find these times to be like, oh, I need to write tonight. And I have a really supportive partner who, some nights I'll just be like, hey, I've got to do this project, and he'll play on video games or jump on Twitch or do something like that, and I can do my writing, and that seems to work out well too.
So I have one more question before we close. I don't know about Eric, but I'm for my personal sanity and productivity, I usually work on one project at a time. And then once that's done, I start on another one. So being that you collaborate with other people and you're writing multiple series or serials, writing multiple serials, right? You're writing two, or you're writing
one serial. I have a series. Yeah.
Okay. And then your own stuff too.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, like, how do you segregate in your brain and in your workspace or in your time? How do you decide how do you do three projects at one time? I just don't even know how a brain can do that and not get confused.
So I took the Clifton strengths, and like my top two are like input and I can't think the other one off the top of my head.
Mine's input and empathy.
Mine's input and ideation, which basically means I'm a word vomiter of ideas. It doesn't stop. And I think that lends to why I'm able to kind of like split my mind into 4 different projects. That doesn't work for everyone, and I more than recognize that. But for me, I love being able to think about one thing while working on another thing and have this other thing sitting here and percolating. And it works. It's hard. Sometimes there are moments where I have burnout, but I will just get myself back into cycles of habit. So I think that the important part for me was understanding the energy that I have to put towards a project, and then accepting the fact that projects may become delayed, and not being frustrated over that. Because the key to me was frustration. Anytime I was frustrated, I was like, no, you signed up to do all these projects. You need to stop being frustrated and just do what you can when you can. So I don't know. I think that was the key for me, was just knowing that I can do that and not be frustrated.
My ideation is 18. And with empathy being number 2, I think I would be constantly like, I wouldn't be frustrated. I'd be like, oh my God, they're going to be mad if I don't get this done. And they're going to, and I would just like work myself into a tizzy and then not be able to work because my emotional would just nosedive. But
yeah, I mean, it involves a lot of communication.
Yeah.
I have to make sure that everyone knows that, hey, I'm working on this over here. I mean, like the serials, I have to get an episode out a week. So I know that I have to, and I know that roughly it takes me about an hour or so to do any of the edits that I need to for the piece. So I know that I have to set that time aside. But really it's that communication. It's making sure that I'm constantly talking with everyone I collaborate with.
Yeah.
I don't have another question, but I want to just like thumbs up to what you said. I think frustration and worry are very similar. I think like when you get frustrated, it's a tax, and and the only way to deal with it is to find a way to get over it. And if you're frustrated, you're going to lose writing time, or you're going to lose quality of life time, and those things ultimately are working against you. So coming to peace with your humanity as a creative is just it's so key. You can't do it all the time.
Exactly.
Damn
and
it.
Nor should you.
Everyone
too bad. Everyone has their ups and downs. And I think you have to just respect the fact that when you have your downs, like you may not get to the page that day, and that's okay. Period. There is nothing to add to that. It's okay.
Thank you.
Just pick up when you can.
Thank you for saying that.
That's a great note to leave on. I think that again, we're people who listen are writing. They're at different stages in their writing path, and I hope if we can touch somebody today who's frustrated, I think take it from people who are, doing the same thing as you. It work to get past it. Find peace with the imperfect day.
Well, thanks so much, JP. Where can people find you online if they want to know about your fiction or your author services or podcasts or whatever?
So I have a website. It's jprindfleischix.com. It's RINDFLEISCHIX. And the IX is there because I am, in fact, the ninth.
Wow.
That's awesome. I actually didn't know that about you.
I didn't know anybody could
There
be
you
the
go.
ninth. That's pretty amazing. Like that's continuity
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah, about 1700s, I think. So that's when
Wow.
the first one of us.
The first one of you appeared. All right. Well,
Yes.
we will put that in the show notes. And thanks for joining us today, JP.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, Eric. Bye, everybody. Keep writing.
See you.